All right, next up, we got my boys, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. 28 tournament appearances, 2 Final Fours, no championships to speak of. We've gotten close, just haven't gotten over the hump. Now, last season, number 3 seed lost to number 4 UConn on their way to the championship, 54-82. Got the doors blown off, wasn't even close, and UConn ended up hoisting the trophy. So, that being said, Bulldogs, who have been on the bubble for the majority of the season, well, actually most recently in the last month or two of the season, have slowly started turning it on. Now, I've watched a bunch of games this season, probably not as much as I wanted to, but keeping tabs on this one. And I guess the first thing that I come through that I'm missing on this team is what we've been used to in previous years, and that's star power, right? And by star power, the Chet Holmgrens, the Jalen Suggs of the world, the Domantas Sabonises of the world, the big time names that have been most recent years associated with the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and they've been in tournament after tournament. They've had a nice little streak going. This was going to be potentially the end of their streak, but they've been salvaging it most recently with a bunch of wins, especially the most recent one against St. Mary's in the WCC. And obviously they've been playing a lot of, cupcake games, San Francisco and Portland, Pac, all these others. But another win against Kentucky. That Kentucky game was the weirdest game because I was like, all right, they've lost some weird, strange games over the course of the season. I mean, Santa Clara, they lost earlier on. I'm like, there's no way they're going to beat Kentucky. And here they are. They beat them 89-85 a while back on, I can't remember, in the middle of the season. So this team, led by Graham Ike, who another local kid from Colorado here, by the way, 16.9 points per game, kind of leading the way here. But most recently, again, win against St. Mary's. I think this team suffers mainly from that star power. I don't see Graham Ike as that bona fide star that they've typically had compared to the Chets and the Sabonises and the Jalen Suggs of the world. They just don't have that this season. And we knew that going into the season, that they weren't going to be, led by one particular guy that's going to really be a game changer. And we're seeing that on full display here this season, Scotty.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Gonzaga's come a long way. They were not good at the beginning of the season. Every game they played against a good team, they lost, right? They lost to Purdue, they lost to, and these are tough teams, obviously. UConn, none of these particularly that close. They lost to San Diego State. They lost to Santa Clara, as you talked about. They lost to Washington. Have they improved? No doubt about it. But the West Coast Conference is almost as bad as it's ever been. Yeah. Outside of St. Mary's, no one's relevant in that conference. St. Mary's is a pretty decent team, and they did get a win recently, or their last game, I guess. This weekend against St. Mary's. The problem is their best players are in the post, which I don't love because they're putting up these numbers against inferior opponents that they won't see size wise in the West Coast Conference. It's very different than running into athletes that play for these, big conference teams. The guard play to me, like Nolan Hickman's their best guard, and I just have concerns about how they can hold up once the tournament starts. Again, now they're doing it differently. I think the West Coast Conference is. Usually they were a week ahead of everyone as far as finishing their conference tournament, and they're still kind of that way. They don't play for 9 days now for whatever reason, and then they have their conference tournament, so they're gonna get a little rusty. And then you're playing against hopefully you're probably play against St. Mary's at some point, because that's the only other good. St. Mary's was 15-1 in conference play. I think Gonzaga won everything but maybe 2 games in conference play. and everyone else is trash. Like Kempom doesn't have another team in the top 70 in their conference. Like it's not a good conference. I've talked about it time and time again. You pick up bad habits. It's hard to get in rhythm and face teams where like things work against certain levels of play, and then you just figure out it doesn't work against other levels of play. So Gonzaga to me has a very, very tough road every year because they don't get the ability to like stay sharp against and figure out what works against the best teams in the country, because they don't play them after the start of the season and teams change after that. So while Gonzaga I think is definitely better than they were at the beginning of the season and they're progressing and they'll be in the tournament, I don't see, like you talked about the star power, I just don't see an avenue where like this team makes a long run in the tournament.
Yeah, and they're ranked right now 15th on KenPom. They're 10th in offensive rating and 40th defensively. So, and I'll get to this thought here. At a point in the season, they lost to San Diego State, and up to that point, Gonzaga was one in that particular game 5 of 19 on threes, and failed to shoot better than 30% from behind the 3-point line for the 5th straight game at that point. So that was when they were like 9-4 on the season. That was early on. Now, with that being said, the fact that they can't have reliable shooting from 3, like you mentioned, they get a lot of their points from the paint. I struggle to see them be able to stick up and hang with the teams that can hit those. And I know they are playing better defensively, but at the same time, there's going to be teams that are going to scorch them, and they're going to have to come back, and they're not going to be able to do it with 2-point shots when it's digging themselves that big of a hole. We kind of talked that with the Tennessee. We're talking about it here with Gonzaga. Now, again, they are better offensively overall. 121.4 rating, offensive adjusted on the season. So that's points scored per 100 possessions. So they'll be able to get some points. It's just whether or not they're going to get outgunned by the 3-point line at any point. So they're going to have to really focus on their perimeter defense if they're going to want to stay in games in the tournament. And I just don't see it.
Which has never been their MO.
It's not been.
It's not like Mark Few's strength as a coach. He's an offensive guy. I have a hard time seeing them athletically being like, we'll just lock you down on a D. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And here's the thing. I'm going to be rooting for my boys, right? My Gonzaga Bulldogs. I'm going to be the expectations I've been saying are different this year. They're not expected to do anything, so maybe they're hitting their stride at the right time, and they're going to have a chance to prove everybody wrong in the sense that nobody sees them doing anything, and they overachieve as opposed to underachieving with a high seed in the tournament like they typically do. So